I'm going to tell you that this is new to me, probably as well as you. I am not accustomed to teaching young scientists online. Everything that I've done in my over 30 years of teaching has been face-to-face. So what I've done today is I've collected some things that I have been teaching throughout many years. And I really thought about how we could teach science at home, remotely and online, but these are also things that can be done in the classroom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what we've done in the classroom and we're going to extend it and how it can be taught online, and mostly remote. I'm more in favor of remote learning. I think the interactions that we have with our students is really important. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. And so this is the focus. Motivation, science, and young kids. And so it is a K-2 for this session. However, much of the content and information can be adapted for older kids as well. I'm going to go back through the next generation science standards. California has adopted these standards, most states have, and just to remind us how we need to look at the 3 core areas of this as we're teaching. And then kind of teaching, facilitating online strategies will be embedded throughout. Some of my favorite sample activities, my son, he's 16 and helped me make and create some of these, and they are, some of them are old ones and good ones that we've used before, that I think would be really good for online instruction. And then finally, I'm going to talk about a science to go box. So here we go. Science inquiry in children. Well, children are natural scientists and they ask questions. They want answers. If you've ever been a kindergarten teacher, a pre-K teacher, and you know, they're the ones asking the questions. As kids get a little older, they seem to be, it's not that they don't ask questions in their heads, it's that they really don't want to ask questions out loud. And truthfully, when we're online, students don't want to show their faces on very often, particularly when they're older. And they still have these questions, but we want to create this as a norm, that the teacher is not the one asking the questions all the time, but we really want to encourage our students to do so. And so my belief is that learning science is a lifetime journey. My initial degrees early on were not in science at all. I was actually scared of science. Well, I really just didn't do well in it. Didn't think I could ever be a scientist. Ended up getting a PhD in science education, and that was my own journey. And so most of the courses that I teach at Cal State Fullerton and my research has been focused on science. So I can tell you I am a living example that it is a lifetime journey, and I just wish that my teachers had taught science in a way that I learned science later in my life. So the other thing about science inquiry in children is that you want them to question things daily. Kids are often thinking, you know, you've seen them at school, you've seen your own kids, they take a ketchup packet and they just smash it. Oh, I wonder why that happened. What, you know, and they're intrigued. It's something kind of goofy. Or they take a paper towel wad and they throw it up and it sticks to the ceiling. You know, these have to do with science. It's crazy, but it does. So some of these things that you can look at on a daily basis really can be a starting point. They can solve problems. They can gain these content and skills, and content is different than skills. So content, of course, is what they're actually learning, the conceptual, the understanding of science, and the skills are what they do. So you want to have both of those things, and you do it through scientific processes. And then we want them to take control of their own learning. Even at the earliest level, we want them to be in control. And we'll talk about what that looks like. So these are some things that I've written about and science inquiry practices. And this is what I believe is critical to having them I don't want to say perform like scientists, but you can see my last line here. It says become a scientist in the process. And one of the key processes that scientists engage in every day is observation, almost every day. Scientists also ask questions. They examine information sources, plan investigations, use tools, interpret findings, make predictions, propose explanations, and obviously communicate their results. If you're in the science world, you are going to communicate your results through publications. And we have read a lot of scientific results lately with COVID-19. It seems like we read them all the time. There's like this really quick, we need to get some science more on a quick level rather than a long term. However, for your students, there are quick investigations and there are long term. I really advocate for the long-term inquiry activities as much as possible, because I think that's the in-depth learning and it takes place over time. And if you use these things, if you can think about these things that are pretty basic, but incorporate them in what you're doing with your students, you really will have a reciprocal interaction where as a teacher, you're not the one always leading everything, but you have your students start to lead as well. And I've seen this happen out in the field. I've seen it, young children working with my own pre-service teachers. And I'll tell you about that a little later as we move through. Okay, science vocabulary. I wanted to mention this because so many times science is taught as define these words. You need to know this word. My belief, and a lot of educational science education research supports it, is that you can learn science vocabulary naturally and more effectively. So it's not looking up a definition. It's not saying what's the definition of this word, but it's through the experiences. And so you want to bring those ideas out, and then you can label the science part later. You don't, and they can label it one thing. Students speak a variety of languages. Let them label it in their native language first. Then go through, and then if you're moving toward English vocabulary and science, you can label, and you could label as a group together. It happens through conversations and relationships. And I put especially online here because I believe that those conversations and relationships can be built. As difficult as it may have been during these last few months teaching online, and I'm with you because I typically teach an online class or I teach a face-to-face class. I very seldom teach a remote class. And a remote class is different because I'm actually teaching on a computer like many of you were doing. And so I had to change some things, and it was a lot of kind of trial and error asking students. But I do believe that those conversations and relationships have to continue and be formed through instruction. What I said earlier about depth over breadth, and that's going on long-term investigations and not a lot of quick short ones, which they're fine, but for real learning to take place and for learning that will be integrated across different subject areas and within their own experiences, these are really important to go into depth. And then when you're going into depth, you're also providing multiple exposures for the same topics. And once you have it over and over again, it's like a field trip. I did a lot of work in when I was at the Natural History Museum, and I always encourage teachers to come to the museum multiple times, because the first time that students get to the museum, they're really thinking about things like the bathroom or the gift shop or where are these things, and they really don't know what they're even expected to see. So if they go in a second time, they already know it's there, and some of the real learning can take place. And I think that's the same. So if you're taking kids out and let's say you're at school and you're going into the schoolyard and you are observing different things, you should do it multiple times, because that's where they're going to gain more and they're going to have the added value in their learning. Have them create interest in words and new vocabulary. I'll show you that a little bit later on some wildlife cards, and that kids have really been excited about. Write the words again in context. Don't define them. Read lots. Also with this K-2, I say sing lots. Tons of children's books available for you. I'd also say online, I don't know at your school if your library has a fair amount of online children's books, but that might be something that you talk to your school about this summer. I think it would be really important to have those, but there are also online books in the public libraries. So really you can look at what's available there. All right, so inquiry skills, like I've been saying, can be taught remotely. These are 4 big ideas that I believe will make your remote teaching more successful. And I think one thing is communicating with families. I think it's important to talk with, I don't know how, if you can talk with them and they can be on your Zoom and talk about expectations, talk about materials, talk about time frames. I know one of the things that one of my friends has a 2nd grader, and she says that it was really exhausting for her because she felt she needed to sit with him throughout the day. And then when he would do the activities, she felt that he wasn't prepared and set up to do them. So she would do the activities with them, which is great, but she's also a mom of 3 other kids and has many other responsibilities as well. So communicating this and try to finding, and let them know exactly if you're going to be remote with them at this time, and then you're going to have them go do something at this time, and then they come back at another time. The kids can typically, if you set those expectations, let them know they are online with you at 9 a.m. You take a break and you come back at 10:30 or whatever time that you decide works. Absolutely connect with students. I know that it's difficult at times for everybody to show faces. I know that my own kids don't want to show their face. They show them maybe the first few days, and then they like to put up their own picture, or they like to put up a V for Vance or something of that sort. But I believe that probably K-2, you're not going to have that problem. Maybe in the upper grades you will. You can do the things that you're used to doing. Read stories. I've got a book here, and I'll show you. I'm going to read a little later. The Cloud book. I could read this just like I read before. Sing songs. You could have the lyrics in a certain place. It could be on the screen, and do all these things together. And there's so many science stories and so many science songs. And when I say science stories, they're fact-based books that are written in a way that have a lot of content for the kids and their understanding. And then I've probably said this, I don't even know how many times in this little bit of time frame we've been together, but allow time for kids to investigate, have them ask questions, observe, classify. They can do this in small groups. So I know if you're in Microsoft Teams, there are ways that kids can work in small groups together. I know you can go into different rooms on Zoom. And so then the teacher can pop in and out of these. And so it gives the kids a little bit more time to talk with just a few people, or maybe 3 or 4 in a group versus the whole. And then you can share within the groups. And then the last thing is to provide input. You've still got to be there to clarify these concepts. And science misconceptions are really difficult to undo sometimes. And those things are important to realize. So you are important, you are a facilitator, and making sure that you're clarifying some of these concepts. And most of the time you clarify them after students have had experience with them. It won't make much sense to them if you do it early on before they have. Again, you can ask questions, have the kids ask questions, And it should be a reciprocal type of atmosphere. All right, this is an example of some questions. How to get kids interested in things, but also how to train them, if you will, or educate them on how to ask questions. So these questions can originate from a student. The teacher is the facilitator. Teacher must model good questioning. What does it look like? Well, I'm going to give you an example. So this is a certain organism. I'll tell you that much. And this is a practice. I might say to the students, okay, today, I want you to ask questions, but they can only yes or no questions. So in other words, they have to form their words in a way that I am only going to say yes or no. And so they might say, is it an insect? And I would say yes or no. Is it a photograph? Did you take the photograph? Is it at night? And you can see some of the questions I have here. Is it bigger than my finger? Is it smaller than my finger? Because there's not a scale there. Well, I will tell you that this was taken. I took the photo and I took it at night and had a black light shining on this certain organism. And it always, you can see that the black light itself highlights, you know, the scorpion is what it is, and kind of the different anatomy. So these are neat things. Pull out those awesome photos. You don't have to take them, and have the students ask these questions. And when they ask them where you're only saying yes or no, it's really difficult, but it helps them and trains them on inquiry. So that's one example that you can do with your students. And moving into the next generation, or going to the next generation science standards as we get to the next activities. Remember, I told you just to, as a review, most states have adopted these standards, and it's important to remember as you're teaching science. Now, if you're teaching TK, the preschool learning foundations in California are available for you, but I think this makes a lot of sense even in the TK and PK as well. So you're looking at practices, what's actually being done, and those process skills. The content of science is what they're actually learning about, the deep concepts. And cross-cutting goes into other areas. It's the large ideas that might even cross-cut within science or over into some other disciplines as well. And this is just an example that you can see if you're looking at the NGSS standards for K-2. They're listed K1 and 2, and I just highlighted how they build on each other. So for example, interdependent relationships in kindergarten, observing and looking at the interactions between plants, animals, and the environment, it moves into structure and function of living things within certain environments. And then it goes to second grade, interdependent relationships within ecosystems. So they really do work together nicely, and it's nice, whatever grade you're teaching, to know which area the other grades are focusing on. And this is an example as well. You can go through, I've given some resources at the end of this presentation, and you can remind yourself of the NGSS standards and how they work together. Because I think if you try to move these and integrate these three things, you'll be much more successful. And so this one talks about the needs of plants and animals in kindergarten, and examples can include really anything within your area or within your kids. So if you're teaching remotely, they can go out within their communities, within their own, if they have a yard, or even if they don't, maybe there's a, you know, someplace close by that has some area that they can observe. And so they can infer different things. This one says, oh, deer eat buds and leaves. They must live in a forest. That grass needs sunlight to grow. These are inferences, of course, but they are factual. You can check them. And then this shows how they work together as well. And you can create models for the practices. And for K2, this includes things like having kids draw diagrams, physical replicas. They can create and build dioramas, I encourage drama while you're teaching remotely. And storyboards, of course, can be used with the students or with the teacher. And then if you move over to living things, you can see how these core disciplinary ideas relate to what the needs of living things. They need water, air, resources, land, and so forth. And so do humans. And then the cross-cutting concepts you move over, they are in, and all of it's not here, but they're within a system in the natural world. And so there are many systems. So how many systems? There's a solar system. There's an ecosystem. How are they alike? How are they different? But they are still a system. So they're a really large idea. And if you look at these habitats, and this is what I'm going to next, this is just one example. You know, when it rains in Southern California, we have a lot of earthworms. And when it doesn't, they're more difficult to find. When it rains in Southern California, we have more roly-polies or pill bugs, but in the drier season, we don't. So depending on the season, you're gonna have to think about what kids might be able to explore. And you might say, go out and find an earthworm. But if they can't find an earthworm, it's going to be more difficult. So I kind of like going out to explore and ask them what they find. They may find a lot of ants. I know they come into even our home in August. So I know they're coming from somewhere, and they tend to really need water at that time. But whatever it is, they can still gain the same scientific understanding about the interactions of an organism within their environment. And they're honing their observation skills and their inferences. They make inferences based on what they're seeing, and they can collect information and document it. And so these are just a few things to think about, to have the kids go out and observe wildlife. And for the young ones, this would involve a parent. And so that would be when you talk about your expectations, you would, inform the parents, or if they would have an older sibling or someone who could accompany the child. Now, I really like the idea of taking cameras or a clipboard, a small tablet. I don't know about access to cell phones and cameras, and the cell phone is the easiest because you can take the camera, it can be easily uploaded. You will have to check that within your school and within your classroom. I know some school districts are giving iPads and some have Chromebooks, so they have different limitations and different ways that you can use them. Encouraging the descriptive words, and that's where the vocabulary is going to be starting to develop. If they would like instead to have video, give them opportunities to choose. The video is really neat because you could give, if they have the resources, they can edit their video as well and provide it in a different way. So note that a habit, a burrow, a movement, how many organisms, how many earthworms do you see? And I don't even know if you can see it in this picture because it's actually camouflaged a little bit into the ground. Visit another day, same place, same habitat. Are there worms? Create songs. And I have one with the earthworm. So you can have them create poems such as, I live in a burrow. I like to eat dead leaves. I squirm when a human tries to hold me. Who am I? So if you reverse it and you have a student post this picture and they have a riddle, they could post it online, and as a teacher, you could put the picture up for everyone to see. The student can read, or they can, if they're not writing and reading as much, then they can say it. They memorize it. They create songs all the time. And so have them do that. And then the rest of the students can actually say, I think it's an earthworm. Or if it's not, they tell them what it is. Okay, going off earthworms, one of my favorite things to do at school, they can do it at home. Decomposition, because earthworms are decomposers. They actually eat the dead leaves and eat grasses and all sorts of things. So I call it an experiment, but you can bury some food. Now, this was just done at my home, and you can use socks, you can use old pantyhose, or sheer, you can get them at the dollar store, I know, and you cut them up. And these are some things that were buried in my yard just in the last couple of weeks. This is an avocado, part of an avocado, the skin of a banana, grapes, zucchini, carrot, Cheetos. And these were the Cheetos from Trader Joe's. They say they're more natural. These were some candies, and blueberries. So this is just a cup. You put it in, you find a place to put it in the ground. You bury it, a trowel here, about 1 inch below. And then this was about 5 days later. I wanted to leave it for longer. Well, guess what? I was outside talking on the phone one day and my dog unearthed it and brought it to me. So I decided I would go ahead and open it. So if you look here, you cut it open, it's pretty gross. But look at there, even within 5 days. And this right here is a wonderful tool. It is a cell phone microscope. And so you can see within 5 days, decomposition already started happening, some mold, some probably bacteria, all of this is forming. This is a close-up view of the Cheeto. So you can see some things that are happening. And you can see that's the Cheeto here. And this is part of the avocado. And I think this is a close-up of the avocado. And this is what this does. These are about $15. And I'm going to talk about how you can create a kit for your children as well, if your school is allowing funds to do so for things to keep at home. All right, so I'm going to move on. That is something you can do, decomposition, but have students, if you can, have them show photos, talk about things. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. They can even have people guess. After you have 10 days, it's going to be more difficult to guess what these things are. You can also put things like styrofoam and aluminum foil and look at how they decompose, because they may look exactly like they did when you first put them in. All right, so that's a great idea, and you can bury all sorts of things, and you could do that throughout the year. If they don't have a yard to bury, it might be when I say a science to go, maybe you have some things like soil that you give them in a container. And then this goes on to creating books. You could actually create a book related to the decomposition activity, or you could create books about other things. This is one of my favorites, the cloud book. And this is old Tommy DePiola, one of my favorites. And it starts out, almost anytime you go outside and look at the sky, you can see clouds. Well, I'm sure kids see clouds most every day. Clouds are little drops of water or ice hanging in the upper atmosphere, high above the earth. And it goes on and on. Students can create their own any way you'd like. This is just one example of one of my students from many years ago. And this is my cloud book. And as you see, this is what's inside. So you open these two flaps, and then inside, this child wrote some things at the end, but she identified and used cotton balls for cumulus, stratus, cirrus, and then talked a little about the cirrus clouds. These are the gray cloud. This one looks like horsetails. These are puffy. They are made of a gas, but you can't see it. And you can see this vocabulary coming through. And I think that kids can do this on their own. They do need some facilitation, and they will need the materials. And so that's why we're going to talk about the science to go. But they can read them to each other. They can read them to their family members. They can create, as I always say, put a song inside that book and sing them. All right, and create puppets. These are the ones my son and I just made. I've had this one for years. She truly was Viola the germ for years. She did not just come out in COVID. And there used to be a song and some things we used to do with my kids when I was a teacher, and we'd say, Viola the germ, she can make you sick. Well, I think probably right now, it's a really good idea. You can talk about COVID. Maybe kids have questions about COVID-19, and you're probably, if you're going to be partly on campus and partly remote, or if you're on campus the whole time, you're gonna have to talk about germs. Well, what a great way to talk about it than to have Viola, right? You're not saying it, Viola's telling you about it, telling about herself. What happens? Well, if you eat your noodles with your hands and you have germs on your hands, those germs are going to go into your body. Well, okay, so how do we keep our bodies free from as many germs or as possible? So have Viola talk about it. Another thing I like, this is Sammy the Salmon. This is the one my son made. And you could say Sammy the Salmon lives in freshwater, but also lives in saltwater, makes a journey into the ocean, comes back. Talk about the life of a salmon. But what's neat is if you want your kids to each have a puppet, they can talk through the puppet. Sometimes kids are self-conscious. I mean, I was a little self-conscious today. I've really never done a webinar like this. I've taught class remotely and online, and I'm thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if I was just using the puppet? The puppet's talking, not me. So if you have your kids create these puppets, they can learn all sorts of science surrounding the organism that they pick, but they can also be Sammy the Salmon when they answer questions. So it's not them answering, but it's actually the puppet. And I think that's really a neat way. And it's a different way to do it and shakes things up, makes it a little more creative. And then I have a couple more of ideas, and then I'll open it up for questions. These are wildlife trading cards. You can see here, this is a colleague, Sam Awera, and she owns the Art and Wilderness Institute. And I told you I'd tell you about this. So my pre-service students, pre-service teachers met her students at a local park, and we went on a hike together, and her students taught my students. And now these are students that were ages 9 through 11. My students were blown away, and they could not believe how much knowledge the kids taught them. And so Sam had created these cards, but I really think your kids can create similar cards as well. And these are things that are native to Southern California, and this is the California ground squirrel. And if you look here, I don't know, I thought I had the card as well, but she has all sorts of things, and you would have your students, you know, look underground related to the squirrel. You've got tracks here. The lifespan is about 6 years. They eat berries, insects, all sorts of things. But this is a wonderful way to get kids learning about it. And if you're in the classroom, you can actually trade these cards, and that's pretty cool. These are some others that she did. Toy On is one, and you could see that a lot if you're out on a hike in Southern California. You can see measurements are being used here. And so these are examples, the deep root system that they have. She always has a photo that she took, and then she draws different things. And then I didn't have the photo. I do have the photo of the hawk, but I didn't have space here. But I wanted to show you how she showed the hawk and the binocular vision, the curved beak and so forth. And you can see that's what he's liking to eat, or she, different talons, and it just shows structure, function, and interactions with the environment. So these are really awesome. I think the website is and the resources also that you can order some, or I think you can, if you join, you can go on her website and see, but I think you can actually earn these cards in some way, and I can't remember how, but it's a great site. And then animal tracks. If you're going outside, if you're observing, I always say you can find tracks. It's amazing if you have your eyes wide open and you're looking for something. These are some that are from stamps. And if you're not in the classroom with the students, they're not going to be able to do this. If you want to, I have a resource. Acorn Naturalist is a great source, and you can order stamps, and you can probably get them other places as well, Amazon and so forth. But this is a raccoon, and what it is these are the hind legs and these are the front ones. And so if you may not see all of this out on a trail, but if you wanted to investigate or have the kids, you go, oh my gosh, why are these front paws and or these tracks different than the back? What would they be used for? Is there a reason? And then this is the coyote. Look at the difference here. These are their back legs, and these are from their front. And so again, I'm really, I really want the observation and the questions to come through. And if possible, if there is a way to have photographs and to share these, they are really doing the work that scientists are doing. And then finally, the take-home science kits. These are just some ideas that I gave you today. But if you wanted to do these things and you wanted to have a take-home science kit, I think it would really be important, depending on the amount of time your kids are going to be learning remotely from home. So these are some things that I pulled out. I think a magnifying glass is really a good thing. You can see, these are very inexpensive. You can see a little closer, and kids really like using those tools to feel that they are observing in a way a scientist might do. The cell phone microscope to look even closer, and it's a little more expensive. Sorry about that. Sorry, oh my. I think I lost the screen. Sorry about that.
We still see the screen, Amy.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna just shut this whole phone off. I'm sorry about that. Okay, we're almost done. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so I'm gonna just pull this up.
It might be just minimized on your.
Oh, here it is, resume share. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh, who knew? I forgot my phone is connected to my computer. All right, so we're at the end here. You want to have a take-home kit, and it doesn't matter. Some things can be maybe socks, or they can use their own socks, the colorful pipe cleaners that we had. The trowels you can buy at a Dollar Tree store. You can order them for a minimal cost. I think the small shovels or trowels are nice, but you also want to talk about not invading a habitat so abruptly. And you want to talk about environmentally how you would do that as well. If students don't have these things at home, you really want to include them. The glue, the markers, the colored pencils, and all of that, so that they can enhance their learning and from their observations and drawing. I like different colored construction paper to cut. Index cards are always nice, particularly if they want to make their own index cards. And then any other items that may have multiple uses. I wouldn't say the one-use things are that important to include, but things that you can use over and over again would be really important for these boxes. All right, and I have resources that are not coming up now. There we go. These are just some things I talked about in this these series of slides. And so if you want to go back and just review, I think the next generation science standards, and if you just look at how they were created and why, and how they're organized, I think it will help you as you organize your own science instruction, because I think we sometimes look at these standards, but we don't look at how they really fit together. And then, as I told you, if you want to go to Art and Wilderness Institute, trading cards, resources, and more, Acorn Naturalists, Animal Tracks, Wildlife Resources. And I live in San Juan Capistrano. Tree of Life Nursery is off the Ortega Highway. They have a lot of educational resources. They have a store that has resources. They will answer any of your questions if you're a teacher, if you go out there, and they're really great. So that is all I have today. And I can take some questions. Thank you.